It's
We
cool.
got
good.
some questions, guys.
I know we've been going on for a while, so I think our concluding questions can be Ryan's question actually. So his question was, for those who are not involved in the community or don't have access to BBUC or a similar organization, what do you guys suggest to them on integrating, or I guess how to integrate the culture in their daily life? For example, not everybody has gongs or even knows the dances. Is there a philosophy or mindset they could live by? Um, there's a response also from Kenneth saying, I mean, starting conversations with the parents and immediate relatives um, can spark up some good stories, and it's a good starting point. What do you guys think about that?
Oh yeah, right on. He said random conversations with parents can spark great stories, which especially with shelter in place, I've had the opportunity to ask more questions and share stories with my mom and with the immediate household. Yeah, definitely dialogue. I think for those who can't connect with a local Igorot community, um, I mean, in terms of a mindset, well, let's start with Charlene first. Let's see where
Yeah.
you're our guest
Thanks.
speaker. Yeah. Hmm.
I mean, that's honestly a hard question for me to answer because that is something that I haven't. Again, like I've been, very fortunate in having a community around to rely on, and even having just like cousins to talk to. Even though I have like a lot of cousins on my dad's side, I have close relationships with my cousin Little May and Jennifer on my dad's side, who are and we would all share the similar question, same like kind of curiosity in, why is our last name this, why this and that. When I try to think about somebody that may not even have that as somebody to go to, like, I mean, I know that at least now you can look on YouTube and see more of you can go to the internet and see more of our culture, whether it is, you got to look really hard. And I have a list of good Igor dances on my channel, on my,
Yeah, your
but
family.
but even if you just to try to like, hopefully if hopefully you do have like one cousin, an aunt, an uncle, somebody that you could ask, like, hey, who are our grandparents, like, how did they meet, or just to spark up to start that conversation is always the best. It's like because even though you may not have a physical community, like you could eventually keep asking questions until you like learn of somebody else and this and that, and then eventually build a virtual community, because that's exactly what we're doing here. And at the same time, like, like sometimes, it's just a simple question. And I mean, unfortunately, like fortunately for that, I have this, like everywhere I look, there's another Gort person here and there, but but at the
Now.
same time, yeah. But but depending on where you want to start, I think that if you can start with somebody in your family, like that would be the best way to go, I think.
Yeah. I started talking to my dad and my mom about, well, just asking them certain questions. But it was weird because growing up, because you're their kid,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you don't think about that stuff until they start to get old.
Mm-hmm.
You're just like living life every day. And I find that a lot of, because I always talk about, like, when I'm doing workshops and stuff, especially about dances, I always tell people, go talk to the elders, go talk to them about what they know, about the dances or the culture, and find out as much as you can, because you're not going to get one source. You're never going to find just one source. You just talk. If they know, they don't know, and then sometimes you get information from what they don't know. And
Mm-hmm.
like, I think I find a lot of value in that, but I didn't recognize that until I got much older. And especially when I started sharing the culture, then I realized, oh, if I'm starting to teach more about the dances, I gotta learn a little bit more,
Mm-hmm.
And what I found, like especially like with my parents, there are things it was only when I only because we were cleaning the house, okay, we were cleaning the house, and I started finding some of my dad's old like files from when he was in the military, and so I started asking my mom certain questions, and asking my mom about like, hey, how come what happened to dad like in the 80s in terms of like his military career, like why didn't he do this or didn't do that, and then I find out a little bit about the history that like in the early part of the history, most Filipinos weren't allowed to become, they were enlisted, but most Filipinos weren't allowed to go beyond being stewards or cooks, and he came in during that early era where they weren't, and but it was in the late 70s. Things started to change. I forgot the exact year when they started to allow uh, Filipinos to go beyond just stewards and cooks. But when he finally was able to go through that, he wanted to become a mechanic, but he ended up fighting with two guys, and then ended up getting blackballed because they wouldn't listen to him. I think part of it was it was racial. They saw a brown guy giving orders, and they didn't want to listen. So somehow they ended up fighting. My dad kicked their ass, and he ended up getting blackballed. So he wasn't able to reach the goals that he wanted. And so I
He
think my
still
dad
did 20 years though.
he just did, but my dad had a little bit of bitterness in him when it came
Right.
to like work ethic, like, and being a hard worker, and like I could always, like when we were young, my dad was kind of scary. he was a real stressed out guy, and he was like a volcano sometimes, just like just get totally angry at us. And it was I started to realize more and understand more of why he was frustrated, because he was limited in what he wanted to do, and he felt it was unfair that he got blackballed. My mom started telling me this stuff, and I'm like, "Mom, why didn't you ever tell me any of this stuff before?" And she goes,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, I don't know."
Yeah.
But it's only until you start asking questions
Mm-hmm.
that like all this stuff starts to come out, and then you learn a little bit more about not only the history of your family, you learn about the culture. So like, there's a lot of things that you can do starting with your family, and I agree with what you said, Shar, and what Kenneth said. It's like in terms of mindset, because Ryan asked, what kind of mindset can you have? I think the mindset is a mindset of curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yes.
that mindset of curiosity will help you want to search for truths in your life, and want you to search for more. And you have to have a little bit of a passion for wanting to know who you are. Now that's connected to curiosity, but in that search, you'll discover so much, and if you have that kind of mindset, I think it'll take you quite far. The other thing in terms of the culture is to recognize that the culture as well, and we've talked about this quite a few times on the podcast, is that the culture itself is very much alive. It's very much alive. It's not something that's just like on a stage. It's not something that's like just in a picture. Especially if you are Igorot, or you just realize that you have some Igorot blood somewhere. Maybe your great 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 grandfather was from the mountains and was Igorot, and somehow you found out like you're 1/8 or 1/16 Igorot, but you're still curious. You can still find out a lot, and if you don't, n- one thing, check out if you even do have a local Igorot community near you, because you might have one. Some of those folks think they don't, but then
Mm-hmm.
you might realize that there's a whole group. Like even my brother's wife, I'm going to talk about my brother's wife a little bit. When they first met, she didn't even realize there was other Igorots there. She thought her family were the only Igorots in America until
Oh, wow.
because she went to UC Berkeley, and then she met another researcher who had met me and Jay in San Francisco State, and she was jumping from different universities from San Francisco State to UC Berkeley, and then she found that this researcher found out that we were Igorot, and then when she was talking to Lillian, Jay's wife, she asked her the question, and then she told her about her, because part of it was to find out like a little bit about finding out about your background. Well, this researcher found out that she's Igorot as well, and then she connected Jay and Lillian, and so that's kind of how they met. So there are some folks who don't even realize that there's like
Mhm.
an Igorot community right next door to them,
Yeah.
so close. And Berkeley is just on the East Bay, and Lillian was originally from Sacramento, and which is about an hour and 45 minutes away from San Francisco. So and there's a lot of Igorots in Sacramento as well. So that's one thing. if you don't know about your community, find out, because there's always, especially if it's like BBAC of LA or BBAC of Northern California, they're always willing to open it to have open arms if especially like if you want to learn more about the culture and you have you have the blood in you. So those are a few things, I think, guys.
I really
Jay?
agree. I agree with the idea of inquiry and wonder. You have to be curious about it. If not, then it might not matter and might not be as important. But for those who find it important and find meaning in it, being curious about your culture invites you then to ask questions, questions that allow you to kind of like find answers in there. But it does come from one's own personal desire, personal call to want to know more. And you will do a whole lot of uncovering. You will do a whole lot of in investigating, and a lot of that is just quite. I mean, the idea of finding the stories that are part of your own family stories will connect you to the narrative of the wider community also, because you'll hear commonalities, and all of those commonalities, like there's no coincidences that so many of us have this. My mom was a nurse, my dad was in the military, then went to the post office kind of thing. That's a very common thing for a lot of American kids. But there's definitely common threads out there that become part of our own family lore. That way Disney doesn't have to tell us what our family lore is, or even though I have Yoda here, we have our own to share too. That's pertinent to who we are and who are we becoming.
Disney.
Yeah, Disney. Disney's the biggest purveyor of
Culture.
of culture out there. They own Star Wars. They own the Marvel universe. They own Disney stories and all of those fairy tales. I mean, geez. And not that they're bad. Actually, they're quite archetypical for the most part. A lot of them you speak, beyond what you're seeing in there. But they're not the only storytellers out there that tell us about who we are. In fact, we have our own stories, and I think there's a value to that. Now, one of the things that we'll be talking about in a few weeks, just to answer Ryan's question, we'll be talking about the concept of inayan. And that's actually pretty rich and deep, because that's something that's very specifically noted towards Igorot people, and there's been a lot of study about it. And we'll have a little bit of a conversation about that in the upcoming weeks. So doing our research, we'd like to share that with everyone who's out there. And if people have more, I mean, we're just like 5 people here, who know what we know. But if there's folks out there who know a little bit more, feel free to put on the chat or contact us via, I don't know how you contact us, but Facebook. Yeah, there you go.
Facebook or Twitter.
Igorot World Facebook channel.
Twitter.
There you go. And we
Facebook
all
and
Twitter
have,
as well. Yeah.
for the most part, we all have some individual accounts too to that. And so, I mean, all of this is about creating some sort of dialogue. We don't know all the answers. I mean, but we have our own experiences, which are, truthful and legit. And so, as we connect the multiplicity of truth and experience out there, we find common narratives. And I think in a world that seems quite divided, I think that's what we need to strive for, is to find what these narratives are that connect us and bind us together. So as we like when people talk about, hey, we just celebrated the 4th of July here in America, that's actually quite important, because it's one of the few things that we could actually do, that we have in common.
Mhm.
Blowing fireworks and eating, barbecue. But then that seems to be and for Charlene, that's her birthday. So how good is that?
It's Canada Day too.
It was a Canada Day.
Canada
On the
Day
1st.